So, hello and welcome to the Assay. Today, I am happy to be joined by Will Coetzer, founder and director at Pulse Intelligence. So, Will, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Always great to be able to catch up with people, even if it's online. But yeah, I thought we could start with a bit of an introduction to yourself and your experience in the industry, and then we can get into Pulse.
Yeah, thank you. I've been in the industry for around 2 decades now, frighteningly. Most people that know me would probably know me from Stratum International, which is a global executive search firm that I founded like 13, 14 years ago, working across 60 countries, 400 mandates, mainly working with boards, C-suites, as well as crucially, perhaps for the rest of the conversation, a lot of due diligence with private equity funds, sovereign wealth funds, and financial institutions around the world. And for the last, probably 10 of those years, I've been an active investor within the mining industry. And then for the last 14 months or so, I've been, founding and as well as developing Pulse Intelligence.
Okay, great. So, what is Pulse Intelligence? Can you talk us through kind of the background to it and maybe a little bit about how it works?
Yeah, so it all came about, ironically, out of developing a workflow for myself, trying to figure out what this thing is. What is AI? What does this whole thing mean? This was the end of 2023, and really, what it transpired was sort of an absolute light bulb moment for me in terms of my own. I suppose many people are going to ask themselves the question: your own future-proofing. What does this mean for you and your career, and all the frightening things, but also all the opportunity that AI presents. So, really, what is Pulse Intelligence? I asked myself the question as someone that's been in the industry for 20 years, as someone that's used the platforms, as someone that's paid a lot of money for data. What if S&P and Woodmac and Palantir, what if those businesses were designed by Apple and ChatGPT on the latest technology? What would that look like? How would you interact with that? How would you be able to automate that? And almost most importantly, how would you be able to future-proof it because of where AI is going? And really, that's perhaps a crazy vision, but that's really what the vision is for Pulse Intelligence. So it's starting with a relatively traditional software as a service or SaaS platform where you can engage with it in a traditional way. But I think the absolute material departure from the past is the automation as well as the instantaneous availability of accurate data. As well as the audit trail and the ability to validate that in real time, which then forms foundation for the second part of the business, which is an information as a service business, which is really being able to comp data both on a platform as well as in your own models in real time, instantaneously. And then the third pillar of where we're going is inevitably vertical AI agents, where you will essentially have a co-pilot assistant, probably a machine that's smarter than all of us combined, working, that's been discipline trained in your domain, as well as horizontally across the industry, to be able to automate essentially all the remedial tasks as well as all the administrative tasks initially, and then eventually being able to co-pilot you. That's the vision, I think, not just for us, but this is a generic vision for AI. I shouldn't say vision, I should say this is already happening. This is our vision for it anyway. Yeah.
Okay, great. And so, having been in the industry for quite a while, obviously you've developed Pulse with kind of a problem-solving framework in mind. So, what are you hoping? What are you looking to achieve with this platform?
Apart from the existential issue, I think what we're trying to achieve in the short term, I should say, we're working on archaic systems. We're working on platforms and infrastructure that was developed, especially in mining. It was focusing on the data, not the end user. It inevitably, and this isn't a criticism, this is just an outcome of technological availability. If you think about, I saw a survey the other day, it was on LinkedIn, it was another data provider, and they reckon that on S&P specifically, half of the people surveyed, analysts, managers, executives, researchers, indicated that 50% of the data is either inaccurate or out of date or both. So, let's be kinder to S&P. Let's say 25%, across the spectrum. But the reality is that should just not be the case anymore moving forward. So I think this is the big challenge that many legacy systems and companies have. I mean, if you think about the problem that they face is the problem that everyone else is facing. Essentially, you're running, you're essentially using horse and cart and smoke signals and the fax machine, and we're now in the new industrial revolution. And the difference here is this is going to take, I mean, keep in mind, AI has already been happening for a decade. This is only becoming mainstream now, but the next 5 years will be completely transformational. So the problem we're trying to solve is being able to essentially help our clients future-proof this journey by being at the forefront of technology, but also, without any fancy tech language, it's just doing basic things really well. So, for example, we looked at a major problem. I mean, you can download this or request this survey we conducted. We surveyed 120 odd executives in the mining industry, and these are global heads of funds, sovereign wealth funds, PE partners, heads of research. These are relatively senior people. We could argue arguably the most senior people in investment research in mining. And what we discovered is at their level, this isn't necessarily even the analyst level, which it'll be inevitably a lot more, but at their level, they were wasting up to 17 weeks per year just searching for information. So if you think of the most basic application of AI, even if it's the only thing it could ever do, that's the one thing it should do. Like, why are you going to a website and downloading a report to see if the data you're paying $30,000 a year for is accurate, or just to validate anything? Or why are you subscribing to 200 RNSs to find mineral resource data manually? So this is really basic stuff. So this is a problem that everyone has in their own world, whether you're a BD person, whether you're an analyst. So that's the initial problem that we're trying to solve. It's just instantaneous availability of audited data so that you can do your job better. It's about not outsourcing, as they say in Silicon Valley. You need to decide which part of the cognitive process you want to outsource. So I think the big problem as well from a user perspective is, good has never been easier to achieve, but greatness is now much harder to achieve because everyone's just settling on good because it's now automatic. So this is another big problem that maybe people need to think about, is their own positioning and their own engagement with technology. Outsource the part that doesn't require you to think, and future-proof yourself by becoming exceptional based on your ability to think and your ability to be strategic, because you now have a lot more time, or you should have a lot more time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get into that kind of the adoption of AI and how people can essentially future-proof their own careers in a little bit. But just looking at kind of the availability of data, which is so crucial to so many industries, what does it mean, say, for the analysts that are using the platform, like to be able to access this kind of information in real time without having to kind of dredge through all of the different parts to kind of combine the information they need?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned a moment ago about basics, we're in a way, the world is not ready to have a vertical AI agent existence. It's obvious, but it's an inevitability. I mean, you're not going to negotiate that reality. It might take 5 years or 8 years or 10 years, but it's coming. So if you think about, I'll answer this through an example. So, a workflow, and this is one of many workflows, but a very basic workflow that we've developed for one of the leading royalty and streaming businesses is, if you think about mineral resource data, so they have 250 or 300, whatever number of assets. So before automation, this poor analyst has to subscribe to 300 RNSs. They have to look if it's mineral resource related. Sometimes it's not the primary topic of the RNS, so they have to go look for that. Then they have to open it, then they have to find the document, then they have to get to the page, then they have to read it, then they have to export it. This is all done manually. Now that's one of the most basic workflows to fully automate. Through technology, you can automate it in the format the client wanted. You can automate it in the spreadsheet columns that the client wanted. This is just level 1 automation. Level 2 automation is it just goes straight through an API directly into their models, all automated, right? So that's sort of the near future. And then the third level of that for an analyst is speaking to the AI agent. So I think this is, if you think about the availability of real-time information, what does this mean? Well, it's very simple. If you don't embrace it, you will not be relevant. I mean, it's very simple because it comes back to that, everyone is now really good. That's a new baseline because you can automate a lot of stuff. So how are you going to be different? Well, I'd like to think it's the combination of speed, which is real-time availability of data, but it has to be accurate, right? You have to know that there's an audit trail. And I mean, for example, one of the very basic features on the platform we provide is, any piece of data is time-stamped, and there's also an original source link. And if you click the link, it opens the actual page of the data. So if you think how simple that actually is, but it saves something like 20% of the entire day if you're an analyst, So if you think about that insanely simple application of real-time data, so it works both ways. It's both data you receive, but it's when you process, and also then, of course, what do you do with that information? How do you apply yourself in order to achieve ROI on that? Can you do better deals? Maybe. Can you do faster deals? Can you do more deals? Probably. Can you think about things that you never thought about before because you now have half your day available? Almost certainly. So I think this is the key part. I mean, real-time data is it's an interesting one. If you think about, I'm going off piste here now, sorry, but if you think about, people that come into a lot of money, or, people that are retiring, and a lot of people have this existential crisis because the big challenge is not the discretionary time. The big challenge is you're not prepared to, or you're not educated or disciplined enough to do something with that time, right? So this is where the big disconnect is. And this is why people, and we'll talk about this later, but this is why people need to really pay attention to this, because you can have a lot more free time, and you're either going to be irrelevant or you're going to be really, really good because you've invested that thought process and that muscle memory over the next 3 to 5 years to be on this journey, rather than just saying, I'll do it when the AI is ready. Well, the AI is never going to be ready because it's going to get exponentially better. So you better start building that muscle now. And it's all about instantaneous delivery of information, right? So that you can do whatever you do in life faster, better, more effectively, whatever your version is of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I do feel like there are still so many people that are quite reluctant to adopt AI in their day-to-day work and in their careers. How do you stress the importance of adopting and embracing?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a number of ways. I mean, the first one is, I think we've just covered some of that now, but if I put it in one word, leverage. Just think that through. What will you be able to do if a lot of what you were spending a lot of your time on, your very expensive time and valuable time on, is now automated? So leverage is absolutely crucial. And I think that's, if you think about leverage and time availability, I mean, that's almost sums up the whole thing, right? Yeah, I mean, not sure what more I can say to that apart from really think about how you will be relevant moving forward. Because, another, I think this was said probably a year or so ago, and I really don't know who said this, but one of the leading sort of thinkers and voices in the technology space. And they very simply said that, AI will not put businesses out of work or out of business. It'll put businesses out of business that don't embrace it, for sure. So again, just think about logic and think about, Moore's law in terms of technological availability. So, if you resisted the Industrial Revolution and you're still using a plow, well, I don't need to explain to you what that would have meant. If you resisted the, internet revolution and you still relied on smoke signals and fax machines and well, good luck to you. And this is the next evolution. The only difference is, I mean, Moore's law kind of applied in terms of, the sort of halve the time to the next innovation. But this is going to be exponentially faster. This is an unknown even for people at the forefront of technology, but it's generally accepted that within 5 years, you will have AI in your pocket, probably for $20 a month, that is smarter than the entire human race combined across all disciplines. So it's frightening, and I'm not pretending to have the answers to this, but the only thing you can do is prepare yourself for it. And I think people really need to understand this. This is not going away. In fact, it's going to get exponentially more powerful, exponentially more instantaneous, almost certainly really good and really bad. Of course it is. But like any industrial revolution, that's just the case for everything, right? We think we have this unique situation, but many generations have had this before us. The only challenge we have is it's not going to take a generation or two to show its hand. We don't have time for us not to be part of it because that'll be our kids' problem. Absolutely not. If you're professionally involved in anything, even if you're in your 60s, this is highly relevant to you. So you need to really think about this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was reading an article this morning that was talking about kind of jobs and the way that people have to kind of adapt their work in order to kind of future-proof and, adapt their careers and make sure that they remain relevant moving forward with the use of AI. So I was wondering if you've seen some really interesting examples within the metals and mining industry, specifically about how the industry has been shown to embrace AI and machine learning and similar technologies.
Yeah, I'm a relative newcomer to this from a data analytics investment perspective, but in terms of the larger business. So, for example, if I speak to let's say the EYs of this world, or even Woodmac, or some of the other data providers, there's from a professional services or a data perspective, of course, a lot of these businesses have been working with Microsoft BI and with a variety of sort of exploratory marquee size or large scale providers. So that's been going on for some time. And I think a lot of them struggle because again, it's broad-based AI. I mean, a lot of these companies struggle to use it internally because you think, well, this is not made for me. This is made for everybody. So I think from a professional services perspective, I've seen quite a lot of that already. I mean, of course, within automation, robotics, within energy delivery, within efficiency. So a lot of site-based information.
Mm-hmm.
I work with a very other interesting company called Realm Alliance, who provides security, software and detection software across the entire supply chain for mining companies, which is essentially a software-based business that you can run on old hardware. So, these things are transforming security, safety, fuel efficiency. I mean, this is massive. I mean, the other obvious one I haven't spoken about is discovery. I mean, look at Cobalt Minerals, a $4 billion essentially tech success story backed by the world's largest tech investors. But that's an outlier example. But if you look at, if you go to mining conferences, it gives you a good clue. I mean, it's about discovery, making it cheaper, faster, more predictable, more efficient, and this is the forefront of where we're at now, right? I think discovery is probably the one that quite rightly, a lot of people are focusing on investing. It's the R&D department of mining, for reasons that's obvious if you're an industry participant that I won't go into. There are cycles in this industry, and we're at the bottom, probably 2 years in of the next mega cycle. So, it's now time to up those R&D budgets again. So I think this is what we're seeing across the spectrum.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to miss the opportunity to put ourselves in there. I mean, we're putting ourselves on the top of all of this in the wanting to be this information superhighway for everyone to be able to benefit through the mining life cycle, through our ability to, not just automate data, but also be able to provide our clients with encrypted environment AI agents so they can use it on their own data. This is not about public data. This is about being able to engage with any data. The difference now is you can create agents that can seamlessly interact with that sort of data. So, another area, just finally, again, one we're involved in, so I'm going to have to mention this. So I'd love to mention this, is just if you think about due diligence, investment due diligence. So training vertical AI agents to be able to do red flag reviews or desktop studies where you can review, 1 million pages in a data room, theoretically in, an hour, and be able to comp that instantly to 5 other assets, probably ones you've never even thought about. So this is all the things coming. So yes, it's an astronomical, renaissance and an evolution of technology, and a lot of people, probably more than you think, or maybe not, is already many years into this. It's just starting to surface now. Yeah.
And so, looking at future generations, what would you say are some of the main things that we should be, say, teaching our children about? How do we kind of focus future careers in a way that embraces AI, but also makes them relevant for a changing world?
It's a big question. I'm not sure I have the full answer to that, but we both have children. We've spoken about this offline before. I mean, I've got an 8 and a 10-year-old, and I think this might be the ultimate irony, but I reckon certainly the bet that I'm going to make is ironically teaching my kids about a pre-technology world. What does that mean? Emotional intelligence, ability to communicate and articulate yourself, to network, to be able to speak in public, to be able to position or sell something, arguably. Like basic human skills, essentially. I think those things are going to be incredibly important because a lot of work will be automated for you. But, and this is, maybe I'm showing my age here now, but this is the sort of Zoom work from home culture where people wonder why they're so depressed and they're not developing. And, because nothing beats the chat around the water cooler. Nothing beats the ability to learn from your mentors and body language and intuition. And you cannot learn that sitting at home, right? So I mean, of course, AI is going to make that even worse if you allow it to make it worse. We all have a choice. You don't have to go with sort of the cannibalization of full organizations. So I think your kids really need to be able to just be sort of pre-technology humans. And I think that would really serve them very, very well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, finally, just to kind of wrap it up, I thought we could look at kind of the future of the industry, the future of AI and these sorts of disruptive technologies. So wanted to see if you have any thoughts on kind of what's on the horizon here and kind of interesting developments or anything that the rest of us should be on the lookout for moving forward.
Yeah, so I think I'd start with, and hopefully this is practical advice as well. I think we're in a low-hanging fruit situation, right? So like, for example, what I mentioned is basic workflow automation. Like, why are you still finding information? Why are you spending hours doing stuff that you can automate? This should be the absolute baseline, right? So, again, I spoke to a top 10 global law firm. We're doing a pilot for their business development department. And just the simple act of being able to distill granular pieces of news that hits the market publicly, but any company globally in real time, they reckon will save them 90% of their day job. Just that, right? So you think just what that's available at the most elementary sort of level of the industry. So I'd encourage everyone to think about that and how could that, in your personal life, almost all of us are on ChatGPT. If you're not, you really should be. Just to start interacting it, build the muscle, get off the sofa and go for a walk. You don't have to sprint a marathon, just go for the walk, just learn. You need to be the CEO of your own career here, like you have to be the CEO of your own health and take responsibility. In terms of a couple of years from now, and we've touched on this, so I'll just briefly mention this. So, vertical AI agents, absolutely 100%. We're already doing mini versions of that within the mining industry, and this will hit you across your entire world, whether it's travel or how you order your food or whatever it is. Now, look, a lot of this will be done for you by the leading tech companies. So you don't have to worry too much about that, but you sure as hell need to understand the basics of how that works and how you can make yourself more efficient. In terms of professionally, the 5-year window, I would say, again, I'm just borrowing Silicon Valley language here, but just agentic AI. The example I gave earlier about having all the world's intellect and research in your palm of your hand in 5 years. It's a bit terrifying, but again, you can't negotiate reality. It's absolutely coming. So it comes back to that automation part, right? Which then I think from a disruption perspective, even though you might not initially tie what I'm about to say with disruption, but ROI is going to be a huge disruption because if you have more time as a knowledge worker, you're going to be irrelevant or you're going to add a lot more value. And I think time-based mediocrity, hiding, all those things are kind of gone. And it's frightening because there's 500,000 knowledge workers in the mining industry. So, I mean, I'm not talking about technical people on mine sites. I'm talking about professional services, accountants, headhunters, whatever you can, lawyers, bankers, all these sort of things. So it's generally accepted half of those are going to be gone, not in mining, globally, in the next 5 to 10 years. So let's say mining, which is notoriously slow, has a 25% adoption rate. That means that 25% of people will not be here no matter how smart you think you are, unless you adopt AI. And that's what I would encourage you as a disruption. Think about how ROI will be disrupted. How can you add value? And that really is by embracing AI to give yourself more time to do the things that you spend all those thousands of hours studying for in the first place. So I think that's pretty important. And the other one, which again, you wouldn't maybe intuitively add to disruption, but I really thought about this very carefully over the last few years, is culture, company culture, because, I've had a 20-year headhunting background, working with some of the smartest and brightest people in companies in the world. And if you think about what's going to happen is, if you're a top-tier professional, you're going to seek out companies that embrace technology, because in very simple terms, it'll enable you to be able to use your intellect better, because the company understands that you're not there to search through spreadsheets for numbers or search the internet for basic information. And again, I make it very clear, just as a final thought, I'm not talking about outsourcing your cognitive process. I'm talking about, thinking about things that you don't need to think about, so you can think about the things you need to think about. I hope that makes sense. So culture is a massive disruptor, I think, where a lot of people will just not tolerate companies that don't embrace it. And I think this is a really important thing to think about when you're a business, because, as great as AI is, it's a people's world. Despite everything you might think about AI, it's still a human world. And we'll just have fewer people doing more exceptional things, as far as based on what we know currently. So I think culture is going to be massively disrupted. People will just won't tolerate it, because there'll be better opportunities. If you think about an analyst, having a pint in a London pub on a Friday evening, and her friend can't join because they're sitting behind a computer having to search for information, and this guy's going, "What? You crazy? What are you doing?" This is going to happen more and more. It's already happening. So you have to think about how that would disrupt the entire definition of what culture is within the mining industry, or within any industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's certainly about kind of making sure that you stay relevant while, finding new and probably even better ways of adding value to the work that you're doing, I suppose.
Exactly right.
Well, those were all the questions that I had for you today, Will. I want to thank you for joining us here today, introducing us to Pulse Intelligence, and kind of running us through what we need to be on the lookout for when it comes to AI, and how to, as you said, be the CEOs of our own careers. And yeah.
Thank you. Hope it was useful. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Speak to you soon.
Thanks, Amy. Bye.